Hi, Mr. Sapora here, Introduction to Teaching, Week 2. All right, so this week we're going to be talking about human development, the different stages of human development, and what are the different characteristics and milestones along the way there. We're going to wrap up and discuss our essay that was due this last week, the Through the Eyes of a Friend essay, so we'll do that at the start of class. And then on the second day of class this week, our second assignment we'll do brown bag presentations, and I'll talk more about that in another assignment post. So we're going to talk about Through the Eyes of a Friend. We'll do this in class. These are some of the things that I'm going to have you reflect on as we do that, and some other things there. Let's jump right into human development. That is what you're going to be working on. The assignment that you're going to have to do this week will be a human development worksheet. And you will fill this out taking notes from the presentation I'm about to give right now. All right, so I just threw a bunch of pictures of my family up here, because why not? Because I got kids that are going through human development, and then you can be old like me, or you can be really old like my grandma Jane. She's 93. Okay, let's just jump right into this there. So what are the major developmental events in a human life? This is something we'll talk about at the start of this. Think physical, emotional, social, developmental. What are the big milestones, events? What happened in here between birth and death? What are the big ones that we all go through? Not just you individually, but kind of as you look around, all people kind of hit these milestones. We can talk about these at the start. The overview of what human development is generally refers to successive changes in the process of one's natural growth. So, occurs through maturation of physical and mental capacities. In other words, we physically and mentally mature along a certain gradient and arc. Most people do, and we're going to talk about what those norms are. There's a lot of gray areas here too. We'll talk about growth. When we say the word growth, we are generally referring to changes in the structure and size of a living organism. Okay, so that term there. And human growth and development are ongoing processes beginning at birth and ending at death. There's a couple, actually, there's not a couple, there's more than a couple. There's 6 stages that happen kind of early on in someone's life, right? You develop and progress through some different stages pretty rapidly when you're a kid. And then once you hit your kind of adult life, then things kind of slow down and, you've kind of arrived, obviously. Okay, so you'll need to know these major time frames, and I put a box or a table on the worksheet so that you could kind of fill that out, and you'll have the 6 major stages for childhood, adolescence right in there, and then adulthood. I'm not going to have you memorize those. I put them on the table, but you just have to know like the names of them and stuff, the rough age ranges. We're really going to focus on all the way from infancy to adolescence here in this particular section, since we're talking about education. The reality, biology of human development. There is a timeline that roughly follows age, but this does not cause development. What this means is we can kind of track things over a specific timeline, and we see that most people tend to fall on this, but just because you're age 2, that doesn't mean that you're going to be going through that. In other words, being age 2 doesn't cause you to develop a certain way. It's just most people develop a certain way around age 2. But there's all kinds of gray areas here. The mechanisms that cause development are genetic, right? Internal mechanisms, biological ones that we have inside of certain genes turn on, and genes make proteins, and then those proteins spur our development in certain directions. And environmental. In other words, the world around us also causes us to develop a certain way. So you can stunt a person's development, right, by having an environment that isn't necessarily a healthy or productive one for them. So it's that nature and nurture, right? Our physical selves drive us forward, but then also the world around us promotes us in that forward direction. And genes. Genes are, again, sections of your DNA that code for specific proteins, and these are turned off and on at certain times in our life cycle. They're turned off and on by certain things that happen in our day, right? There's certain genes that are, reactive when we get hungry and things like that. In each person's genes and their DNA and when these things happen is slightly unique and different. and the environment in our world around us. This consists of diet, food. This consists of diseases, right, and pathogens. This is the social environment that we live in. That would tie right into emotional, also economic, though, as well. And meaning, what kind of access do you have to money, to goods, to, all kinds of other things in the world around you. And then the environment is cognitive. Also, what is going on in your mind and head. And that can be different from emotional. Those two can also be tied together. They can be separate. Okay, genes and environment often interact with each other in human development. So what we're talking about here is like your genes and then your environment, this nature and nurture. These play off of each other as you develop. Some of us, hit developmental milestones maybe later in life and things like that. But again, the environment can also play a role in that as well. So those two go hand in hand. Nature, nurture. Let's get into it. Okay. Stages of human development. The first one is infancy, 0 to 1. As a teacher, you will not be dealing with this, but this is what parents deal with. This is the first year of parenting. Physical changes, height and weight. Let's see. Most humans are born weighing around 5.5 to 10 pounds, and they generally double their weight in the first 9 months. So you see a lot of physical growth here. Muscular and neurological motions progress from uncoordinated movement of the head and extremities to development of fine motor coordination. So at first their heads are flopping around and they can't grasp at things. And then, they start making eye contact and grabbing and reaching and putting all of it together. Vision for a baby is poor at birth. They are capable of focusing on objects 8 to 12 inches from the face, and that's about it. So anything further out, you're just a blur. But this improves by about 1 year to permit longer range vision. And you'll see this in a developing child, where they can start to spot and track and actually recognize what they're looking at further out. It's kind of cool to watch. Other cool things with infancy, language. The language of a newborn is to cry. By 1 month, an infant's repertoire expands to include soft, throaty, and gurgling sounds. Also, a lot of crying. What else? Feeding. They are hungry all the time. Okay, about every 2 to 3 hours, infants need to be fed, and this goes on 24 hours a day. So in the middle of the night, they need to be fed. They will cry and scream. Because crying and screaming is their form of language. Okay, they're social beings. Infants respond to human voice and touch in a positive way. They need that. They need that around them. When you take that away from them, and they freak out. Okay. Common infant misexpectations, right? Stop crying. People will say this about infants or 2 infants, and what I mean by misexpectations are you expect them to behave a certain way, or you desire them to behave a certain way, which is completely unnatural. They cry. They cry a lot. They cry when they want things, and then you need to supply those things, right? One of the reasons they cry is because they're hungry. And a common misexpectation is, oh, well, they just ate. God, they eat all the time. Why are they eating all the time, right? Or you want them to not eat all night long, right? Because you don't. You go to bed without eating and you wait 8 hours. Why can't they do it? Because they can't. And they won't. And they will cry then. And I think a big one for infants is they just need to learn to sleep alone. We have a tendency to put them in a crib and want to get them on their own really quick, maybe a little too quick for any young mammal. Mammals, the whole thing about us is we have parental care. We care for our young, right? As a group of vertebrates, reptiles don't, but mammals do. And we pick them up, we carry them around. And for just an infant baby to be kind of just left alone and nobody touching it or talking to it, that baby's going to freak out. That's a normal, natural thing, right? No other species does that, just sets it down and just walks away. We carry them around, especially primates like us. So, you got to hold the thing. You got to feed it. The thing. You do, though. You do. And then when you set the baby down, you don't feed it and you expect it to be cool. It's not going to be cool. That's not what they do. So, yeah, that's just part of the game. Okay, the next stage in human development are the toddler years, 1 to 3. Okay, massive amount of brain growth goes on here in our species. 70% of brain development happens during this couple-year period. So there's a lot of wiring going on in there and a lot of learning and mapping. Although a toddler may not be able to express what they're learning, they're downloading a ton of information during this time. And so it's so important to have that environmental side of things, right? The environment that they're in, what they're exposed to, what they're hearing, and all this stuff, what they're eating, right, as well, nutrition, is huge during this time, because this is going to it's kind of, blueprint for a lot of their life. So they develop a lot of cognitive, motor, speech, hand-eye, emotional, and social development, more than at any other time. So again, they are picking up speech and language. They're learning emotional connection, interaction, social development, how we treat each other, how we talk to each other. All of this is being downloaded during this time, and they're developing it, although they're not very good at it. That's okay. They begin to walk and talk at this time, so they're up and around, crawling to walking, and of course talking starts to happen here. They explore by touching, holding, climbing, and mouthing. So think about like all the senses, right? You're a new human being, you're new on this planet, to this world, and you're trying to understand and map it. And so part of that is they're going to be touching things, they're going to be grabbing things, they're going to be smelling things, they're going to be pulling them up close to their face because of our senses, right? Sight, sound, touch, taste. So they're going to put things in their mouth. Yeah, that's just how it is. So you have to be aware of that and, keep them from getting in the kitty litter. Okay, tentative sense of independence. They want to be a little bit independent, but they need you there. So, they'll walk away a little bit and explore, but trust me, they're always looking over their shoulder at you. Other things. Okay, so their attention span is short. So kids at this age can play games, but they can't really play games with rules, right? So you see them messing around and a lot of just playing, but if you try to set up a Monopoly game, that's a little too much. It's a little too much. And then they'll get upset because they can't track the rules. Self-awareness, they can start to see themselves as a separate person during this age. When they're an infant, they're a symbiotic organism 100%. This age, they start to break away a little bit. They'll say things like no, they can be defiant. Temper tantrums and things like this can happen as they start to see themselves as autonomous and want things and demand them. They will copy what other people do, mainly their parents. So a lot of imitation goes on. Again, 70% of the brain, right, is being wired up right now. So they're watching and then they are imitating. So again, that environment you put them in, even if they're not super able to express what it is they're learning. And so be aware of what you're exposing children to and expose them to really super awesome positive things as much as possible. Okay, so the next big stage in human development, this is where, as educators, we come in, right? These first two, this is a lot of just parenting. And so, as a teacher, a lot of this has already happened by the time that you get a child, even in kindergarten. So much of who that person is already sort of wired in and developed. A lot of that's genetic, but a lot of that is also environmental. So, childhood kicks in here, and childhood is kind of a broad range, so we put some subcategories underneath it. Childhood is 4 to 9 years old, and the grades for right now with play and preschool, we're talking about the first section of childhood when they're 4 to 5, and that's grades preschool to kindergarten right in there. And it really varies when a child starts school in here. Some of that has to do with that developmental stuff. Again, that's that developmental stuff being a gray area. It's not black and white. At 2, you must be doing this. So around 2, most people start doing this. We all develop differently because we're all different. We all have different genetics and we all have slightly different environments. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of a preschooler, right? Up to kindergarten, right in here, play preschooler, 4 to 5. Okay, surging cognitive abilities. Children should be encouraged to explore and try new things. At this point, the brain goes up to 90% of its development. Its neurons are being wired in. Its actual volume and size as well. So 90%, right, is getting developed during this time. That's pretty cool. So again, encouraging kids as this is developing to explore and engage with the world as much as possible with new, cool, awesome things. Sentences become more complex. It's no longer just mindless blather. Just kidding. Motor skills, fine hand-eye, jumping, skipping, climbing, right? Throwing things. This is where all of that is also super fun, right? You have realized that you have a new toy, and that is you. You can do awesome things. So kids love climbing trees. They love throwing things. They throw their toys around. Um, yeah, all kinds of little kid games, right? And speech, yeah, at this point, follow directions. This is an important age where kids need to learn to wait and learn some social norms. I know, right, saying, well, children shouldn't learn to wait, but they should, because in life you have to wait. And so patience, a little more complex understanding of the world around them, aka social norms. When it's okay to do certain things, right? You can do certain things here, there, etc. And they're not going to be good at it, but it's a time to start practicing that. Imagination is vivid, and I like this one, can be blurry line with what is real. We all remember kind of being this age, right? This is, kids believe in the Tooth Fairy, kids believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. There's a lot of fantasy play that goes on, a lot of make-believe. And, yeah, the world's a magical place. It's awesome. But they can have a hard time, knowing exactly what is real in those moments, or they think that some of their things are real. Such as they develop fears. Fear of the dark, fear of animals, fear of death. I don't know that you necessarily need to introduce them to all these things. They'll get there and figure it out. But, as children get older, they might learn about death. A family member may die, and you have to explain that to them. And then, of course, they'll be afraid of it. They might see a movie that's a little bit scary for them or something like that, and then they'll be afraid of that. I think that Tatum, my son, saw Rim of the World, and right around this age. I'm not sure exactly. Anyways, a little too scary for him. And he'd pull his head under his covers every night, and he'd just say, Rim of the World. He was scared of that for like a good 6 months. Oops. So yeah. You want to shelter these little kids from these things. They're little kids, okay? So there you go. They like to be social with other children their age, and they're able to do that. They're able to play together, right? Without you having to constantly monitor or be involved in every aspect of it like you would in a toddler. And they can begin to read. Definitely can begin to read at this age. So again, this is a great age. I think even as far as toddlers go, you can get them to start recognizing alphabet. And at this point, they can start putting all that together because their brains are at 90% capacity. It's amazing what they can actually do, what a person can do. Okay, childhood 4 to 9. Now we're jumping into a later part of that, which would be elementary school, 6 to 9 years old. So right before that, we're talking about Liberty School, right? We're talking about kindergarten, kind of first grade in there, preschool. And now we're talking a little more South Prairie, which is still Liberty first grade, and then up to South Prairie with second and third grade, kind of right in that center part of this later stage of childhood. And so kids in here have kind of hit their physical development as far as it's going to be slow, steady growth from now. They're not making any huge jumps, like you see from a toddler to early childhood, right? Now they start to get their muscle tone and their skeletal structure, and they start to just grow slow and steady. Attention span increases. They understand time. They like projects. They like bigger things. They like being creative. This is starting to be when you could start to get a kid Lego sets and they can actually do something with it. Memorizing and recalling facts. Kids really enjoy this, and they find it satisfying. And not really into deep thoughts. We're not going to get them to, get into what we'll talk about later, metacognition or anything like that. But they like to learn facts. And kids are learning an incredible amount here. 50 to 10 different words a day, new words a kid can learn at this point. Stage. So much, look at, we've got up to 70% by the time a child is 3, and then we jump up to, increasing to 90% of brain development by the time they're 5. Think about how much a person can actually learn and is learning here, and don't think that we need to slow it down. I think that we can introduce children to a lot of new ideas, and they're already learning them because they're downloading everything around them in the world at the same time. But the ability to learn and recall and develop mentally is huge during this time. And we should take full advantage of that as teachers. So kids love to learn new things at this age. They love to learn new words. They love learning. They love school. This is an age where they still super jazzed to be in school, and they look forward to it. Kids at this age learn morals and values. So right from wrong, that kind of stuff. And again, they tend to be a little more black and white at this age. They're not into the deep thought side of things. You know, they'll be real clear about, okay, well, I learned this and we're not supposed to do that, and that's not fair, that kind of stuff. And teaching them, you know, fair really isn't the thing. It's hard at this age. Again, they're not into deep thoughts, black and white a little bit. Ask questions. They want to know how and why, right from wrong, social bonding, group projects. They can get moody and things like this, but pretty easygoing at this age, I think, overall. And kids still look for parental approval, and reassurance is still considered a basic human need. This isn't a secondary. This isn't, oh, that's nice if you get that. This is like a basic human need, like shelter, food, water, love. That's what that is, right? Parental approval, and I would say teacher approval, things like that, and reassurances. Okay, these are still kids, so they need that. Next stage of human development, we're going to move over to East School. Hello, Panthers. Okay. It says grades 5, 6 here, but our school, you know, whatever. But this is along the lines of that. Human development, pre-adolescence, ages 10 to 12. Okay, we call this the most sensible stage of human development. These people have a lot of common sense. This is when we're moving away from childhood, right? We're into pre-adolescence now. We see the world in a different way. Intentionality, looking into the future and seeing cause and effect. It's kind of cool. They start to be a little more bossy, a little more big little kid, a little more explaining things to the younger people around them because they can kind of see future actions and how those play out. This is an age where children will start to see, I love this one, they'll start to see relationships as flawed. The human side of authority, the struggle. What this means is they will stop seeing you as parents and teachers and other things as perfect. They'll start to see hypocrisy in you or your relationships. And this can be hard for them. This can be difficult. You want to not shatter their idea of what you are, what an adult is, by building them up with a ton of hypocrisy up to this point, and then they'll find out and see through it. So, relationships are flawed. People are flawed. That's normal. And the best thing to do is not to totally hide it from them, because at this point they'll start to see it anyway. And the best thing to do is not be a total hypocrite. That's helpful too. But it's unavoidable at times, and so what you want to do is just be honest with them and talk to them. Morality and cooperation, this is where they get really into their friends and spending time with their friends. This is me and my stepdaughter Rory right there, and this is a perfect picture of what she is like right now, wanting to sit in her room and write more, or connect with friends more. Things like that. But they're still kids. It's funny. Sometimes I'll be like, oh my gosh, she's becoming more like a teen. And then other times I'm like, what a little kid. And so it's a really fun age to see that as they start to develop. She's on the 10 side of that too. Okay. Kids like to categorize info, and they can begin to proofread their work, look for mistakes, fix things like that. They're starting to be more critical thinkers at this age. Deeper, a little more critical thinkers. Okay, so that's kind of the East School age, and there's a lot going on in here, right? On the back end of that, right at the 10-year-old side of things, you're going to get them being fairly immature and still kind of childish, and then you get over towards the 12, and you start to see them turn into teens, right? So this is right in that arc, and again, I think it's a really, really fun age to work with because they're, again, sensible. They still like school, they still want to play by the rules, but they also are into their friends and things like that, and they're starting to get clued in onto what is going on the adult side of the world. And then adolescence hits. Dum, dum, dum. So now we're talking junior high through high school, right in here. And this is what we call the teen years, 13 to 17. So, of course, you get that physical growth spurt. Get out the deodorant because these are some stinky people. Just kidding. But it's true, right? And that's even true in the 10 to 12 range too. They need to start using deodorant, to be honest. So physical growth spurt, right? You're going to go from this to this, right? All of a sudden, Sapora had a mustache. How about that? Puberty hits, so a surge in hormones. And what are hormones? Hormones are things that we make in our bodies. They're proteins and lipids. We have genes that are just sitting there dormant, sleeping in our bodies. Everybody does, right? Testosterone, estrogen, different ones that different people have. And at this point, your body goes boop, and it starts making those proteins, and that causes all kinds of changes in you physiologically, in your muscle structure, in your voice, in your reproductive organs, and people change. Boom, right? So you're going from childhood to adulthood, and that is part of the biological side of that change. Cool stuff. Along with that, up in the head, your brain also goes through changes as these proteins and lipids get released. It causes a whole biological reaction throughout your entire body, biochemical reaction. Prefrontal cortex develops decision-making and cognitive control. So a part of your brain that really parents have been driving for you up to this point, you start to develop and learn to drive on your own. And that decision-making as an adult starts to come into play. You start to want to make your own decisions. You start to, kind of play around with making your own decisions, which is a good thing because you need to learn to fly at some point, right? You are going to leave the nest. So now you're starting to flap your mental wings. And during this part of development, especially in the early side of things, so we're talking like 13, 14, this is something that's been getting a lot more research played out on it lately. And it's called synaptic pruning. Okay, so your synapses are how your neurons link together in your brain, and they're pathways. They're pathways that the different neurons use that you develop and have grown in your brain. And what happens in here is that some of these pathways you no longer use anymore because you're becoming more independent, so your parents aren't doing as much for you in those areas, and they're kind of useless pathways. Some of them you just completely developed out of as you have cognitively developed over time. And so your brain is like, wait a minute, let's start rewiring this for the adult side of things. And you start to lose some of those and then develop new ones. And your brain literally starts to rewire itself cognitively, which is pretty cool. And there's still a lot of research going on in this area. You get better at planning, you get better at just adult thinking during this time. You also get worse at thinking during this time. So during this synaptic pruning event, you may notice that 8th graders, freshmen, start to kind of get dumber. I say that in a loving way. It not dumber, but just less smart. And what it is your brain is literally rerouting. There's some construction underway, and trust me, things are going to be running just fine as soon as we, get rid of some of these cones and barricades and fill in some of the potholes. And that's what we're doing now. Okay, this is also a time when abstract and hypothetical thinking come into play. So again, you're thinking on a whole nother level, and you can reason across a wider perspective. You can consider other or new points of view, and it's exciting to consider other or new points of view during this time. Before that, you really only thought about the world in a very narrow lens, the one you needed to in order to survive and make it through your day. Now you're starting to see the world as a much bigger place. You're seeing cause and effect. You're seeing injustice. You may be seeing some hypocrisy, but you may be seeing things from another side of another culture. Wow, that could be cool. That could be different. And so those types of things are generally exciting. Thinking in new ways is generally exciting. Anyway, so people often kind of run that way. They enjoy that, and as you should. Okay, so some general sort of cognitive improvements that a teenager goes through during this time. Again, some big sort of mental growth is happening during this time. And it's important to understand that as a middle high school teacher, what you're working with. So attention, right? Selective attention improves. So during this time, you can focus on kind of one thing while several other things are going on around you, and you tend to get a little better at that, not so easily distracted. You can also choose where your focus goes a little better during this time then. So we should start to practice that more, and I think we do start to practice that more and get better at that. Now, it's not always easy, especially in a high school setting where there can be so many distractors going on around you. But you tend to be able to do that. Your memory improves a lot. Your working memory and then your long-term memory. Your working memory is what you're doing right now. You could have multiple things going on and you could track all of those things. This is the ability to put a tool down and then remember where you put it and pick it back up when you need it, right? My 7-year-old cannot do that for anything. His working memory is trash. But mine, pretty good, pretty decent. I can remember where I put several things, and you also develop patterns around how you do that. Long-term memory, you can start to remember, things that happened, what someone said, someone you met, the name, a story. You can actually tell a story. Try having a 7-year-old tell you a story. It's like their working memory. It's trash. Processing speed, faster thinking, levels off at about 15. Interesting, right? So your ability to take like these 5 different variables, run them through, and then come out with some coherent thought based on all of that information, that's your kind of processing speed. Right? How many variables can you take in and how well can you balance that? We can all get overloaded at times, and it depends on your health. I mean, that depends on your health, how well you're rested, how well you're fed, how much stress is going on in your life. That's health. And if you take care of that, you probably have a better processing speed at any old age. But all the wiring for that gets laid in about 15 once you've rewired. Organization, becoming aware of thought process and can use strategies. You become aware of how you think. You become aware of your distractors, and you can start to develop some strategies for remembering, being organized, taking care of your business, adulting, sort of thing. I have all kinds of little tricks for how I would say remember. I would say try not to totally forget things. Be better. But I have strategies, right? And they don't all rely on my working memory or my memory at all. Some of them are physical things that I do to help me remember things. Okay, metacognition, thinking about thinking, knowing your capabilities, and improving on your weaknesses. This is a big one. After you kind of rewire your brain, you start to develop in the front your prefrontal cortex, which deals with decision-making, multivariable sort of equation things, and then you start thinking about how you're thinking about things, and you can start to improve on your weaknesses. This is you working on you. Before this, you are, a lot of your childhood, you are what you are. You are who you are. You're not really thinking about it. You're not steering that ship. And later in your teen years, these things start to develop more. You start to think about how you're thinking, how you're reacting to things, and you can improve on that, right? You can make changes. You may realize I don't have the best group of friends. You may realize that this friendship really does matter, right? And I need to be a better friend. I need to be a better listener. I need to not be so selfish in these ways. There's all kinds of ways that we can look at ourselves and improve. And this starts to happen now. This capacity for this to happen starts to kick in now. And hopefully it's something that we work on throughout our entire lives. Okay. Other stages, you don't need to memorize these. I have a space in the notes. You can just write them down real quick. After that, right, we've just gone boom, boom, boom through all these major stages of human development. And it's pretty awesome. Then you hit adulthood, 18, 20, and things slow down a bit. There are some things, I have a link to a PDF here I'll have at the bottom, but 20 to 40 is considered young adult. Middle adult is 40 to 55. That's me. Middle adulthood, that sounds less old than middle aged. And then late adulthood. Late adulthood is 55 to just old. So, there you have it. Human development. There are stages that go along with these other ones, and you're free to look those up. Just click on this link right here, and it'll take you right to the PDF where I got all this from. Tatum will take us out. Oh, this is Char, and this is me, and that's my Grandma Jane. Thug life, next to my uncle's rental truck there, hanging out. Grandma Jane's awesome. She's 93. She's been through all the stages of human development and some, okay? And she's still kicking it. So this could really go 55. This could be like 40 years of just late adulthood. That's rad. Okay, again, Tatum will take us out and fill out this worksheet right here. Details, details, details. And then at the bottom, I have an assignment for you here. It says, who were you at blank stage? Pick a stage of development, like one of the ones we just talked about, excluding the one you're currently in. So don't talk about adolescent teenage years. Pick being a toddler up through and write a paragraph describing that person, who you were during that stage or at that stage. Include in the paragraph the following. How old were you? So if you're going to talk about you being a early childhood, let's talk about you being 6. State how old you were, what grade you were in, if you were in kindergarten or first, let's say, if we pick that one. List a significant event that happened to you during that period of time. So, what really sticks out from that year, probably the reason why you chose that one, and identify and describe your then self, at least 2 of the descriptive qualities from that stage, using at least 2 of the descriptive qualities from that stage. So in here you have a bunch of notes taken about the different stages, identifying yourself, a couple of those things that you've written in here, how they applied to you during that time, and type that paragraph. It'll probably run on to a second page by the time you do it there. Okay, 35 minutes, but we killed it. Human development. We will be building on this, referring back to this, using this throughout this entire course, so it's a really important section. I hope you enjoyed the video. Click all the likes and subscribes, and follow me on Teacher Talk. Making stuff up.